Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix. I'm super stoked to share what is new on the shelf with Phoenix. The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. I'm really stoked to be able to talk about this book. I feel like there's a lot of things that I really took away from this book. And the reason why I'm putting it in this philosophical excursion series is because of how philosophical his writing and book actually is. And what it means for our creativity, and what it means for how we flourish in life, with our art and creativity and passion, and with realizing the amazing things that exist in the world and that we can bring into the world, that we can create, and that we can bring into existence. And so, I wanted to start by a little summary, little kind of, I would describe, summary of what I was thinking about when reading this book, which is that creativity has helped me to cope in life by giving me extra outlets from which to express myself, where I might not have normally had that outlet. Creativity and expressing one's creativity can be an exciting thing to motivate us and transform us. It is empowering, gives us a sense of meaning, and gives us something to look forward to. I am presenting these ideas here because I think there is value in creative activity of which is unique to individuals. Each individual decides for themselves how they want to be creative. Now, for those of you who don't know who Rick Rubin is, he has been a music producer for decades and is creative in his own way because he obviously was writing this book and works with a lot of very high-tier artists such as Metallica and Red Hot Chili Peppers. And it's really interesting because his idea is not that there's this premium or limitation or gatekeeping on who is creative. He says that everyone is creative. He says that it's not just for a select few. And it's really interesting because he expresses the idea that creativity isn't just something that you do in a specific medium of art, such as painting, sculpture, writing, music, but rather it's something you do in the world that helps you transform it. And this includes woodworking, this includes cooking, and this includes hairdressing. Whatever example you would use, there are so many ways that we can be creative and that we can utilize to engage with the world. And I love that Rick Rubin is emphasizing this point because it helps us to realize that creativity is such a powerful thing and that creativity isn't limited to just one form of expression, that it really is in all of the things that we do. And so I love the idea that with Rick Rubin expressing that it is more that we try things, we try new things, we get out of our comfort zones, we do something that might make us feel uncomfortable, we do things not being afraid of failure, we do things because we want to do them, because they mean something to us. And I love that Rick Rubin is actually opening up the process instead of gatekeeping it. He wants people to tap into that creative spark. He wants people to try to understand their own creativity within. And so we use the raw materials all around us. We use the raw materials of the physical world, but even the raw materials of our language or our instrument, whatever it is that we choose, the food that we're preparing and the ingredients that requires. And I love that analogy because I think there's a lot of depth to it. Now, Rick Rubin expresses a lot of things in his book, one of which is a more esoteric idea, which is that you listen to the universe. I think that if we can be a receptacle to what the universe is transmitting through us, I think it can make our art even better. And it might be that this is kind of an unexpected idea because we tend to resist the universe, but I think Rick Rubin is very much about this kind of Zen idea of letting the universe speak through you, treating yourself in this kind of imaginative way and this open-ended way. And I love that he describes that because I think it's a super powerful thing. And so what he does with thinking about these things is also thinking about observing the current, about sitting in the moment. So he uses the example of society. Society is always and already pushing us in millions of different directions or in one very specific direction. But instead of reacting to that and being reactionary, and again in this kind of Zen way, he's very much wanting us to open up. he's wanting us to open up to that process and just observe. Observe what the universe is doing. Observe what society is doing, what culture is doing, what your own mind is doing. And this is a very much Zen idea, and is kind of one of the base ideas of meditation, which is the way that we think about how we respond to the world. And I just think it's just such a super powerful thing, and I love the idea. Now, Rick Rubin is interesting too because he also thinks about how in life to really think about our choices, about the choices that we make. He wants us to think about the things that we do. And I love that he uses the analogy that we make thousands of choices. We make so many choices without even being aware of it. We make so many choices that influence our lives in so many different ways. And so treating life as a series of choices that we get to make, I think, is very empowering. And I think it's actually a very freeing idea. And so I love that he focuses on that. Now, aside from being present and being mindful and being open-minded and leaving the process open-ended, I think there's something to be said about how he also talks about how some artists, if not even many artists, are very sensitive people. And I like that he references this because I feel like I'm super sensitive. I feel like I'm extremely sensitive and that I struggle with the world because most of the world is actually very blunt. So I use an ice pick, so to speak, but other people use a sledgehammer. And it might be that that is a very kind of brutal analogy, but that's what it feels like sometimes. But I love that Rick Rubin is compassionate towards that sensitivity because he sees it as such an important part of the process. He sees it as something that helps us to be creative and to be thoughtful and to be mindful and to meditate. To basically be contemplative. And I really had to wrestle with that because I think about it from my own perspective of like, I really am struggling in a lot of ways with my sensitivity to this very day, but I'm also doing my best to do something with that sensitivity and creativity and pain. I want to do something that's beautiful. And so I'm glad that Rick Rubin inspires this sensitivity to come out because he really sees it as something that will help us be able to be creative. Something that will help us be able to process life and to live beautiful lives and to create beautiful art. And I just wanted to acknowledge that that to me feels very hopeful, and it just makes me feel like there is hope in the process. There's hope in being able to communicate our deep feelings and our deep experiences and our experience in life as human beings on this planet. And I think it's just really encouraging. Because I'll admit, sometimes I do get discouraged by my sensitivity and feeling like I'm too soft, I'm too weak, I'm too passive, I'm not doing enough. And so I just have to be thoughtful about that and think about what that means. You know, how the sensitivity is a superpower, the empathy is a superpower, it's not a weakness. That's something I've really been thinking about a lot. And it definitely helps me to think about things in a deeper way. And as well as accept what I am, who I am, what I am becoming, who I am trying to be, what I believe, and what I'm trying to do with my art. And I think that it's super powerful. So yeah. Now, I think that Rick Rubin is interesting because he actually introduced me to another way of looking at what could be called the dialectic, which is literally an idea that's been postulated at least since Plato and Socrates, and that definitely became important with Hegel and Marx. And granted, there's definitely a philosophical history to the dialectic and what it means, but in a basic sense, the dialectic is being able to hold opposing ideas or strands of thought at the same time, or even holding a multitude of thoughts. And so I think the reason why it's a powerful idea to think about multitudes and opposing ideas and being able to hold them is because I actually think that's a very useful skill. I think a lot of the time so many things in life are contradictory and we don't know how to make sense of the conflict. And so it can be really difficult to try to imagine what to do with that dialectic and do with contradictory oppositional things or dealing with a multitude of things that seem contradictory or at least in conflict. And I love the idea because he utilizes this in how to look at the process of making art. So for example, he uses it by expressing the idea that it is about turning inwards and doubling down in a way on what we really believe to be a helpful process for creating art, but it's also about being open. And there are so many ways in which Rick Rubin identifies the dialectic. The idea that we should be serious, but also have the play of a child. The idea that we should work really hard and develop our skills, but also be able to relax in the process and actually don't try, as has been referenced with Bukowski, for instance. Bukowski actually expressed that idea of not trying at all. And so, but approaching the artistic process or the creative act in this way, having this idea of a dialectic as having opposing ideas or different ways of doing things at the same time, I think is actually a super helpful concept, because I think it helps us to be able to analyze and understand our own process with engaging with the world, engaging with life, engaging with our art. And I just love that it's like open-ended in that way, because I do believe that that's one of the benefits of the dialectic, is to be able to imagine that there is a deeper purpose, there is a deeper way of looking at things than we might imagine, and that we can really tap into our process when we are able to kind of bridge the gap between extremes, when we're able to look at multitudes of things. And I think that that's a fascinating idea, because I think that that process helps writers, for instance, because I find that helpful when I'm analyzing an intellectual idea and being able to look at both sides of it instead of just limiting it to what I think needs to be true. But it's also having that slack to be able to kind of double down sometimes and kind of be like, this is the way that I'm going to do it. This is the way that I believe this needs to be done. So I just think it's a super remarkable idea to keep in mind. Now, I'm a writer and musician. I play guitar and I also write my books. And so with thinking about this process of even making YouTube videos and being creative and putting something out there in the world that maybe wasn't there before, I do think of the way in which I love the process, because I love being able to think about things and do things in a way that is creative and novel. And I love that idea. But I also realize that there are other processes that are happening with the process, at least that you could argue for, like Rick Rubin argues for, where the subconscious is picking up on a lot of things too. The subconscious is picking up on a lot of things that we might not even be aware of. And so we want to trust that process. We want to trust the process of what our mind is showing us, where we might not even be aware that that's what it's doing. And so I just think it's a powerful thing, because it's like our subconscious mind is always picking up on things and putting things together, and our unconscious mind on top of that as well is this whole process that seems to be unknown, or at least semi-unknown, but that is there. And so even though Rick Rubin has a little bit of these kind of esoteric ideas about how to think about things, I think it's interesting, because I think it's like there are all these forces that are molding us and shaping us, and there's something about creativity that can be so novel and new and creative and transformative, a kind of metamorphosis, and that some of those processes we're not even fully aware of. Like, I'll admit, when I'm writing, I'm not always aware of why I phrase things the way that I do, or why I pick certain images, or why I pick certain ideas, but it's because that's what makes sense to at least my unconscious or subconscious mind. And so letting that process in, letting it be deep and kind of like a deep water, a deep ocean, I think is a super powerful idea, and I think can be very unexpected in its uniqueness and effect. And I love that idea, because I think there's a lot that can be gained there. Now, I'll be honest, I'm definitely a perfectionist with how I do things, but the other thing that Rick Rubin helped me realize was that maybe I don't need to have an idealized version of who I need to be, or what I need to do, or what I need to create. That my art doesn't have to be perfect, that I don't have to be perfect. And I definitely think this is easier said than done. But as artists, we have to keep in mind that sometimes the ideal is not always ideal. There's a way in which sometimes the ideal is actually short of the ideal, what we end up doing, and so just being aware of that process, being aware that that happens. And I guess I'm learning how to be okay with that. It's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to not be able to do everything. It's okay to not always even really know what to do. And so I just wanted to be open to that process, to the process of the universe, to the process of mindfulness, to the process of creativity, to the process of subconscious processing. That can also be freeing as well, because you realize you don't have to nail it down. That as much as I try to nail it down and be perfect and like capture amazing art and ideas and images and thoughts and philosophy, there's a way in which I can let that process go, and that it's okay that it's not perfect. It's okay that maybe I don't always fully understand what's going on, and just being okay with recognizing that it won't be perfect, and that I'm okay with that reality. So there's definitely a lot that I enjoy about Rick Rubin's approach, and he's worked with artists, a lot of artists. He's helped produce amazing records. And so the interesting thing about him is that, you know, like he wants the process to be open, and he wants us to recognize that there's hope and that there's a way forward. And that what I interpret the most from what he's saying in his book is indeed that the creativity can be most transformative. The creativity can change your life. The creativity can be the thing that wakes you up and that makes you excited about life and that makes you creative. You know, in the process. The process of creativity literally makes you more creative. And not even just the process of creativity itself, but also the process in general. And I wanted to express that I love that idea, that it's like having that open-endedness, having that desire to express things, having that desire to be creative and to transform and have a metamorphosis. That's what Phoenix is all about, right? That's what the Phoenix represents. That's what it means. I love the analogies that can be made. I love the ideas that can be expressed. So yeah, I'm Phoenix. I hope that you'll definitely check this book out. Again, it's The Creative Act by Rick Rubin, and it formed the basis of my thoughts for this video. I hope that you'll check it out. I hope that you'll check out my other videos as well, and thank you for stopping by. I encourage you also to check out my books. I'm always super creative with my books, and I love being able to do that, and I'll definitely put the link to my author page in the description. I'm Phoenix, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.